With this, I'm going to turn it over to Crystal Austin, who is going to introduce our speakers today. She's a representative from our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion group at the graduate level. And just a reminder to everyone, if you could mute yourselves, that would be most appreciated.
Hi guys, are you able to hear me?
Perfect.
Hey, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce and welcome our guest speakers, Brandi Mack and Shelley Davis-Roberts from Designing Justice. We're really excited to have you guys. We actually looked up the company or the organization as students, and we selected this company as one of the places that we wanted to hear from based on the work that you guys are doing. So we're really excited that we were able to have you guys come and present to us to get to know more about what you guys are doing. So just to give you guys a brief introduction on our speakers, Designing Justice and Designing Spaces is an Oakland-based architecture and real estate development nonprofit. They focus on social justice architecture by developing building infrastructure needed to address the root causes of poverty and racism. They also have a specific focus on developing architecture to end mass incarceration and its disproportionate impact on communities of color. Brandi is actually the director of community engagement, while Shelley is an architectural associate at DJDS. Brandi has worked and trained in trauma-informed youth development sector, and she has over 15 years of experience using urban farming as a tool for personal development. She's also the national director of the Butterfly Movement, and she provides coaching in restorative justice with the Oakland Unified School District. Shelley has used her multidisciplinary interests in architecture to guide her work. She has over 20 years of experience in diversified community development and identity and culture. She also works as a visual and performing artist and an educator. And she has worked on a wide range of projects, including affordable multifamily housing, schools, private family residences, commercial and sacred spaces. And also, she is the former chapter president for the San Francisco leg of the National Organization of Minority Architects. So with all of that being said, I'd love for you guys to take over because we're really excited to have, your presentation. So take it away.
Great, thank you so much. We're really excited to be here. And I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
Ooh, I see some familiar faces. Oh, I think we're at a different slide, Shelley.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Yay, we're all here. I first just want to thank the faculty and the staff, the students, everybody that made their way to this Zoom meeting this morning. Even if you just rolled out your bed and clicked it, there's still something to say for that. And so I'm just want to thank you all for inviting us as we begin to really go deeper in how to decolonize design and make sure that it's available. You introduced who we are, but I'm excited to co-present today with my amazing colleague and senior architectural associate at Designing Justice, Shelley Davis-Roberts. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing at this point in career to be working with a melanated woman who is a designer and massing buildings together. The time is now, y'all. It's a fierce urgency right now that we must begin to think about our design tools and how are we going to design to unbuild racism. Well, we got really busy, right? As George Floyd, unfortunately, yet another Black person murdered. Folks have now rang our phones off the hook as we're talking about this unbuilding racism. What do you mean develop architecture for restoration? And let me just be clear, we are abolitionists of mass incarceration. We are designing for the world without cages, period. So don't Call us if you want to just have a little area still with a jail. We're going to tell you no. Abolition. We're seeing something else. So Shelley's going to roll the slides with us. And just as when we got on this call, y'all, if stuff gets a little weird, we just going to love on each other anyway, right? And make sure you have questions, because we will move somewhat fast so that we can have them. And know that this is a presentation, but our emails will be shared. And if you want to get some real conversation, that is available. Shelley, you want to go to the next slide for me? The first question that we always want to ask, and what we think is very important as designers, it starts with us. It starts with the individual person asking themselves, what do you believe? What do you believe? Well, we believe that restorative justice starts with yourself and your own work. How are we doing our work to actually use a lens that allows us to design from decolonization? All of us on this call, whether if you have brown skin or not, have grown up in a colonial system that has prioritized others over others based on capitalism and the need for other folks to be in charge. So our first question that we're always asking folks is, what do you believe? What have you been taught to believe? And what do you really need to know to inform your design? One of the big things, and we'll go to the next slide, really want to talk about that this history, and as you hear and see our beautiful faces as melanated folks, the history of displacement and disposition with our communities is not just a Black problem. This is not just like, you know, Black history. We think about slavery and sharecropping. That's for Black folks to think about. This actually is shared history, that all of us who are here in this country share the horrible wills of our past forefathers and mothers, for that fact, who have designed and created, as you can see in our timeline, as African Americans, from slavery to sharecropping, to the 40 acres and a mule that was never given, going deeper into the 1900s, and we created policies, intentional designs to uphold the ill wills of racism. In our built environment, our public and tax dollars have supported that legacy. It plays out every day. We see it, right? No matter where you are from, we can see how these beliefs are manifested in the built environment. If you look at this next slide, you'll see it. This is what we've built based on timeline, toxic environments. So you'll go to the next slide. Uh-oh.
It's advanced.
There we go. Okay. This is where that timeline has gotten us. Wonderful, we're there now. I teed you up, I showed you a timeline, how racism started, how our wonderful colleague, Brian Stevenson, if you get a chance, please make it to the Lynch Museum down in Alabama, where he does a beautiful design showing us that we went from slavery to the penitentiary. It was an intentional design based on the policies in that timeline that I just showed you. And what happens is we get those environments that Shelley just showed you. We get the jails that you can see here. This is what is the manifestation of the policies and the design to uphold racism. This is the built environment representing it. What do we value? There's no better place to look than in our current architecture for justice. What does it communicate, y'all? Look at this small room with the sisters standing. This is what we are saying is justice. So you want to go to the next slide? The question we want to ask you all, what if we changed our beliefs, our values? For example, what would an architecture rooted in a different form of justice actually look like? Rooted in resilience. What would it actually look like? You know, there's research around restorative justice and alternative systems that says that when a crime has been committed, it's a breach of relationship. It doesn't say that when a crime is committed, locking somebody in a cage is going to change what the crime did. It says that it's a breach of relationship. And so when we think about restorative justice and restorative design, how do we actually repair harm? And this is what we're valuing. I'm excited to talk to you all today from Syracuse because our founder, fierce leader, Deanna Van Buren, one of her very first projects, as she walked out of a work that was ran by a paid architect, saying that there has to be something else for me to do with this skill, with this passion. One of her very first projects was in Syracuse, where she partnered with local community partners and turned a condemned house that was festered with crack into a corridor, into a safe space for community to get together and circle up, how indigenous community has done before colonialization. So it's so exciting to talk to you all, and we can maybe follow up and maybe y'all can do a field trip. I'm hopeful that that space is there because it's intentional for us to begin to show folks to hold accountabilities. That when we design for mass incarceration, it doesn't just affect the folks who are in jail, and Shelley's gonna go to the next slide, it actually also affects their families. That 60% of families that are incarcerated with loved ones don't have their basic needs met. They are also affected by this mass incarceration system. So when we're designing for justice and designing different spaces, we're not just thinking about folks who are incarcerated, although they are the experts. So as we do engage in community, we go right to the experts. But what we also know, and what we're also designing for, is the ecosystem or the family around them. We are accountable to them as well. 60% of the families that are incarcerated, their families can't even meet their basic needs of just living. As architects and developers, we began to use this lens to understand the systems deeply by listening. That's the most important word. If you have a chance, real quick, I know, Shelley, we didn't go over this, and we'll do it later. Write on your paper the word listen. And inside of that word is a very important word in order for you to listen. I'll tell you at the end, but just write it down and try to figure it out. We work and we're accountable to heroes and sheroes like Women on the Rise, a local organization in Atlanta, Georgia, who spent years working to close down the Atlanta City Jail. The fierce leader, Marilyn Wynn, who spent years of her life plagued by jail, got out and said no more, started an organization, Women on the Rise, and they are abolitionists. Most of our jails, if you don't know now, that are existing, people are in jail because they can't pay bail, not from heinous crimes, because they can't pay bail. And if we go back to that, we're also looking at racism. Community builders is who we are accountable to at designing justice, designing spaces. Folks who are working policies, and we're not going to give out, if you can see in that last little bubble, our public servants. You all, we walk around and are clear that we're abolitionists of mass incarceration. So we will not work with our public servants like peace officers, our council members. They are in the ecosystem. Now, part of our job is to convince them that, you know what, no one should live in a cage. And what is your other job outside of being the warden? So it's really intentional. We engage everyone. It's so very important. Our community engagement, as Deanna was saying, and Shelley, you can go to the next slide, is like the secret sauce. You all are in design school right now, and as you go into different firms, and particularly as we think about the future, as we think about and hear the words of defunding police, what does that really look like? What do we need to refund? What do we need to redesign? We actually began with imagination. I'm going to read this. It says, I don't know what the next American Revolution is going to be like, but we might be able to imagine it if imagination were rich enough. We understand, and it's an unfortunate thing, and a great colleague of mine, Dr. Joy DeGruy, speaks of post-traumatic slave syndrome. That is a very real syndrome for African-American folks in America today. And one of the symptoms, unfortunately, is not being able to even dream and imagine, because the design has been to just fit into a system. So one of our biggest intentions as we engage with community is, how do we become somewhat of the pollinator to open up our beloved community to just begin to imagine again a new design? Our community engagement tools, are not just a sticker dot vote, y'all. Don't come and say, which one do you all like? Have y'all been at those charrettes in the community and we're designing and folks go, tell us which one do you guys like? Well, that's not enough. Part of our work in engaging with community is, first of all, knowing that community knows what community needs. And that we stay in our lane as technical designers and say, look, here's what it may cost. As you can see in our left-hand corner there, it's a little circle game, space and planning game, because more than just a pretty building, we need to talk with our community about how we're gonna pay for the building, who's gonna operate the building. So as we engage in developing different processes, we're talking about everything from the root to the fruit, better yet the rind, like the outside skin of the building, right? We're going to engage with it all because the community needs to know that whole part. And the corner over on the side, we even co-create our tool with our community organizers or whoever brings us on to work in partnership with them. Because again, we're also not architects and developers that walk into someone's community and say, this is what you need. Our work, we have been invited in. And we're excited to share with community builders who are often working just to make ends meet. What does it really look like to tackle the built environment that you're doing this amazing policy program and place work in? Shelley's gonna go.
So I'm gonna talk a little bit about.
Let me so Shelley's gonna jump in and I'm gonna come back, and thank y'all for patience because we're all learning to navigate Zoom. And so I just wanted to remind, we're gonna take it easy for ourselves. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, Brandi. So I wanted to just talk about one of the huge cores of our work, which is the concept development process. And it provides the structure in which we work with our clients and partners. So it's not enough to just deliver a great looking building. But we would really want to empower the community with the tools to understand the entire process of what it takes to get a building built, or actually to acquire land or become a building owner. Because typically we're working with community organizers or nonprofit service providers, and they don't have the experience in the process in developing the architecture and infrastructure that they need to support the work that they're doing. So yes, we design to support program needs, and everyone wants all the things, but in the end, where's the money? You know, how are you going to pay for this thing? And this is usually where the huge disconnect lies. And so we really want to help people understand that. So with the real estate and development arm of DJDS, we can help people grasp onto those concepts. What are the financing resources? Is it new markets tax credits? Is it philanthropy dollars? Is there government funding available? And then what is the financial model to sustain the operations once everybody's inside the building? So the concept development process supports the development of a well-constructed financial model, the budget, design research, and then we have the conceptual imagery that supports it, that says, hey, here's what it all looks like, and gets the aesthetic vision across. And so then DJDS and its clients will use these tools to then go out and obtain project financing. And so our approach, we like to generate ideas with the community. As Brandi was saying, we have a robust community engagement process. We have to have end-user interaction and input. We go right to the source, whether it be doing workshops inside the prisons or working with formerly incarcerated individuals in the community, because we cannot design effectively for situations that we have not lived. So we're designing new typologies to support the end of mass incarceration. We don't have these building structures right now, so it's all new. So these are prototypes. And then so we create the prototypes, and then we circle back to the community to evaluate whether or not this is what we heard, this is what we've made, this is working. And then once we have a successful model, then we know that we can start to replicate it. And it's laid out very simply here, but this is happening over a period of months and years, depending on what project that we are doing. And so we ask the question, what do we build instead? And Brandi has mentioned, you have to really look at your own beliefs. And once you've evaluated your own beliefs, what do you value? Who do you serve? Then we can start to answer this question. And at DJDS, we are abolitionists of mass incarceration and the infrastructure that supports it. We believe in a world without prisons, and we know that building prettier prisons is not the answer to what we build instead. So as solutionaries, we believe that we have to create new spaces and building types to repair centuries of disinvestment. And we must support policy and program changes to support whole systems change. As county jails and prisons close, we have to reimagine our justice corridors, which currently have courthouses, probation offices, bail bond storefronts, which is the infrastructure that supports a punitive system. And we need to reimagine it as a restorative system. So this is an example of our vision of a peacemaking center to facilitate restorative justice programming. It's along a civic corridor in downtown Oakland, and we would love to see something like this happen in every major city across the country. So let's unbuild it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the projects and concepts that DJDS has engaged in to unbuild racism. So unbuilding racism involves 3 buckets of work for designing justice, designing spaces. That's restorative reinvestment, restorative reentry, and repurposing and reimagining. And so one of the projects that we've done in terms of restorative reinvestment is started with the Restorative Justice City Oakland project. And what that asked was, what if restorative justice was the primary way to address harm in our communities? And what infrastructure would we need to support that? And so we convened with police officers, restorative justice practitioners, city council members, and the county and others to really think through this. And what we came up with was a corridor of resources. So there was a lot of ideas created around a corridor that would have mixed-use justice hubs along the flatlands of Oakland, particularly where the socioeconomic disparities are most pronounced. And something amazing came out of that process. And so you see the area within that dashed pink circle that's in the middle of your screen, that would actually manifest on the first piece of architecture for the Restorative Justice City. And it was a project called Restore Oakland. So Restore Oakland is one of the country's first centers for restorative justice and restorative economics, or what we like to call restorative economics, in that we were not just supporting the community in design, but we were also supporting them in financing and securing the building itself. One of the tenants, Ella Baker Center, had moved probably over 19 times in the period of 3 years because of gentrification. Rents were rising, well, we need to move into this place, and then something else would happen. They'd have to keep moving. And so it really takes away from the work that they're doing. So with Restore Oakland, we were able to stop that process and be able to help them secure land, help them to secure this existing building, which now houses Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, which holds Colors Restaurant on the ground floor, Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and Causa Justa Just Cause. So we help these 2 nonprofits to select and purchase and design this 100-year-old building. And it's open to house 3 things. So Colors is on the ground floor, and it's run by Restaurant Opportunities Color United, and it's going to train 500 low-wage restaurant workers to get a living wage jobs as servers and hosts in restaurants. And they'll learn in one of the largest fine dining training kitchens at Colors Restaurants. And its focus is going to be on formerly incarcerated individuals, immigrants, low-income people of color who are typically relegated to back-of-house jobs. La Cocina is also going to be located here, and it's a food business incubator that's operating out of this location to help people start food businesses. Excuse me, folks, I have to make sure I plug my computer in. I just realized my battery is running low. Sorry about that. So this is Colors Restaurant on the ground floor. On the upper floors, we house Ella Baker Center for Human Rights and Causa Justa, who is doing immigrant rights and tenant rights out of their headquarters. And most importantly is the Restorative Justice Room. It's the country's first dedicated space for restorative justice that will support the county in doubling their caseload for youth ages 15 to 21, which are diverted out of the court systems and into the restorative justice programs, which are happening in this space. So as I mentioned earlier, in owning this building, Restore is really able to be an anchor in the community. There's not this worry about being displaced. And as a result, they're actually able to offer members of the community investment to be investors in the restaurant. So again, there's not this notion of here's your building and you just walk away, but it's really a catalyst for the economic sustainability for the community as a whole. So one of the next projects I'm going to talk about is the AMP Love Building. So even before the launch of Restore Oakland, this new vision for justice that we had was already being amplified across the country with a similar hub in Detroit. It's called the Love Building. And it's where an organization called Allied Media Projects, Detroit Disability Power, and Detroit Justice Center, and many organizations have created a community hub, and they're sharing resources, ideas, and they're fellowshipping. AMP actually serves Detroiters in actively shaping their future through storytelling and creative community organizing. And it redefines and redistributes power within their city. And we were able to help them conceptualize what that would look like. And so what you're seeing here is the adaptation of the exterior envelope and the surrounding landscapes, which makes visible activities from within. And then the framed apertures, which create view portals that look out into the skylines and the neighborhoods of Detroit. We have common spaces for people inside, and the community that surrounds the Love Building is served by this building. So in addition to opening and activating the building exterior, it also lets light in, and we have views that support the emotional health and wellness of the community. And we think that's really important that sustainable design is not just a certificate that we pursue, but it's really an integral part of our design process. So for example, in regards to the daylighting and air circulation, the view portals allow waves of natural light to come through and flood the interior spaces while also creating opportunities for seating, which you see on the upper right of your screen. And those embed themselves in the heavy brick exteriors of the building. And they're uniquely designed for each facade solar orientation. That way, the harsh rays of the light bounce off the frames of the portal before they enter into the space. Now, from the Love Building project, the Love Campus was ignited. And so with this project, we will actually be purchasing land in Detroit. We're positioning ourselves to do that. We're going through the due diligence right now. And this is going to allow DJDS to officially become a hybrid company tax structure. So we will actually be a nonprofit entity that owns a for-profit entity called DJDS Real Estate Holdings. And the Love Campus will be our first project we'll be using to test our new architecture prototypes, programming, and financial strategies. And it's going to expand the development around the Love Building into a campus. So in this next slide, you're seeing that some of the historical massing that used to be in the neighborhood that we're looking at in the course, in what is called the core city. And the history of white supremacy and police brutality in Detroit, it's intense. And it's that pain that is a backdrop of the work that we're doing. During the uprisings of the 1960s, many of the neighborhoods, or much of the neighborhood, was burned, and it was left much of what was a thriving community decimated. And in this neighborhood, most of the buildings that you see here, which were thriving clinics and lounges and the post office, and most of these are actually gone now. Just many of the lots are empty, or the buildings have been sitting empty for years. And so right now, again, we're in the due diligence of trying to purchase 8 parcels of land. This is kind of a study of what that might look like as we try to develop mixed commercial use with housing. And we'd love to have a campus that had space for theater, film, daily needs retail on the ground floor, a food incubator kitchen, maker spaces. And then we'd like to be able to employ crowdsource funding to be able to, and philanthropy dollars. And so we're looking at how we're going to finance this. A big part of the process is, of course, we're not just showing up in Detroit like, hey, here's what we're going to do for you. We are engaging in a community engagement process, which Brandi is going to talk about a little bit more.
Thank you, Shelley. Just piggybacking on what she said, I know you all are taking in a lot. The Love Building ignited us to come in and support deeper with the Love Campus. That as we worked with Allied Media, who sent out an RFP to purchase their Love Building and design it and house all those amazing folks, we sat with them through our concept development process. They had so many ideas, it spilled out onto the curb. There was then our opportunity, which we first asked our partners, hey, you guys have so many ideas, maybe you should buy those lots so that we can really build them all out. They, again, first time nonprofits looked at her operative building, said, hey, we're really excited, but that might be a little much for us. But you guys have our blessings to go ahead and do it. And so as Shelley said, we're in our due diligence process now at erecting the Love Campus adjacent to the Love Building. We just want to spill that justice on out deeper into the community. And as she also said, what we recognize in the traditional trajectory of development and architecture is met with folks coming in, speculating cheap land. So one of the things we're doing is creating a scorecard of some sort, right? And part of the scorecard is starting with our designers on deck. You see them here in the picture. We have Anthony with the white t-shirt on and Marjan, who are local native Detroit folks who live in community, who work in the justice sector. And Anthony himself spent a considerable amount of his life in cages. However, while they're teaching and understanding and as a mentor to many, many moving forward. So they are our scorecard. They are on our team. They attend our design meetings. What we know, y'all, and what I hope you guys remember as you're going and gals through school is that we are all designers. And that as we have chances and privileges to go to different institutions, unfortunately, mass incarceration institutions and some of our colleges are not different. They're both institutions. And so it's important for all of us to decode some of these tools and make sure that everyone has them. With our designers on deck, and engaging in community, if you all can imagine, our beloved community, African-American, Black, Brown, immigrant folks before the pandemic were in a pandemic. So we have had to get really busy researching and developing tools that we can use to engage with our community so that we're not just like, yeah, we saw something and this is what the community needs. And so we've been busy taking all of our interactive tools, you know, our kinesthetic, because we love to touch folk, energy, hang out, eat some food together. And we've had to actually create them online into different surveys. But I also will tell you that picture that you saw, Deanna and I, we were just on the road. We consider ourselves to be essential workers, whatever that means. That's another conversation. Because what we understand is that buildings are still being built. Land is still being bought. People are still getting it. So in July, Deanna and I flew into Detroit and we drove from Detroit all the way down to New Orleans, where we have projects from Ann Arbor, Louisville, on down to Mississippi and New Orleans, where we're working with other beloved community members to start imagining this world that we're going to live in that doesn't have cages. And so we did take that drive because we needed to do some in-person. We were safe, don't y'all worry about it, but it is very important for us to listen and from our community so that we're not just saying, this is a new idea. You know, words can become buzzwords. So we've been researching, and this is one of the type forms, as you can see. Then Shelley will go to the next one. I'm sure you designers are familiar with this next tool that we're starting to use called Muro, right? Y'all know it. You can give a thumbs up in the caption if you see that or something. Let me know y'all here and see your sister. See, this is a participatory thing. I told Shelley the only thing that was weird is we be talking at folks. Once again, thank you so much, Crystal. As restorative humans, it's a dialogue kind of a situation, but we're using things like Muro to help divide, you know, and decrease that divide with our community right now. It is so very important. And we're also planning one more trip, y'all, before the winter season. So we will be in Detroit doing one more engagement on ground. And this first leg, as Shelley alluded, as we do our due diligence, community engagement is an ongoing thing. Our designers are on deck, our paid staff on our team. This isn't just a one thing. We want to make sure this is living. I don't know if I introduced it biasly. My background in design, I'm a permaculture designer and biomimic designer. So my lens is looking at a very holistic perspective there. One of the things we've also, as we go deeper into our design, and want to talk a little bit about our pop-up resource village, which was, it's in our restorative economics, restorative reentry. I want to put it in all the buckets, Shelley.
Restorative reinvestment.
We said, see, look, she said another one, restorative reinvestment. Well, I put it in all the buckets because what we've done with this village is we are showcasing mobile infrastructure and placekeeping. Y'all may hear about placemaking, but I'm going to say placekeeping. Because what we have to be very careful with some of the terminology and things, we're like walking over a community. Shelley alluded and showed you in the historical massing, the buildings that exist in Detroit don't exist anymore. That does not mean they didn't exist and community wasn't there. With the village, we are making sure that we are placekeeping. We're using mobile architecture, popping up in the community where community lives, you know, not going downtown area or across near the pier, but like right on the block. In fact, our pop-up was on 7th and Center Street where the Black Panthers activated the free breakfast program. And that's where we popped up in a community that's being heavily gentrified right now, but folks are still there. We are here. Elena, we will not go anywhere. So the pop-up village has been an amazing tool to just show the reinvestment and what mobile architecture looks like when we actually engage community. What we use in this process, y'all, down to the logo, we did co-branding with community. The community designed the village. We stayed in our lane. I want y'all to see this video to give you a little bit more.
Sorry, Brandi, I think there's a little bit of a delay on our end, so I'm going to start the video.
Is Shelley stuck too?
Is the video supposed to have sound?
It sounded like you guys were not able to hear the sound. Is that right?
Yeah,
I'm back. Can you all hear me?
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what to, what to do about that, but
Am I back? Can y'all hear me?
yeah, we can hear you, Brandi.
Okay. So I was going in on that village. Did y'all see the video for the village? Did we show that, Shelley?
Yeah. Were you able? I think there's a really bad delay. I don't think the sound came through.
Okay. I will send you all the link because we have a beautiful, beautiful video that was created by one of our anchor partners in the village. Because again, down to the design of the implementation of the village was community. And so one of our community members who anchored our health and wellness component of the village did a beautiful video that we'll make sure to send over to your instructors so that you can see a little bit deeper some of the partners and the holistic design process that we used in designing the pop-up resource village, which now as we move into COVID, again, I think we were ahead of our time, or at least Deanna Van Buren has been, because this pop-up village is what everybody's doing now, right? In every city, everybody's outside on a curb trying to make it happen. Well, we've been designing the village. And so as we think about COVID, we're just putting in all of those different breaks that we need to make sure that our community is safe and thinking about how can we use this as a post COVID healing tool that will continue in community and not just a fun time, but a part of life, right? That this is a continuum. But we understand art and culture, and I'll say this often in African-American communities, is our healing. That in broad community, it is art and culture, we're spectating. And you'll hear if you come to the village, no spectators allowed, you must participate. It's a participatory design. That's what we do.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about our, and can everybody hear me? I just want to make sure before I move ahead. Okay,
Yes.
great. So I want to talk a little bit about our restorative reentry bucket. And this is one of the harder prototypes to develop due to financing and the complex programs needed to implement it successfully. And there's also NIMBYism, that not in my backyard syndrome. So when folks are released, they're coming there, they have to be released somewhere. But most people are like, well, I don't want those people in my neighborhood. But the thing is that incarcerated people are going to be coming back into society, whether we like it or not. And in order to stop the cycle of incarceration, we have to start to divest from prisons and invest in restorative reentry infrastructure. So this is some formerly incarcerated folks, Tyrone Green, who actually runs a Green Streets program. He's one of our stories, the stories of a successful reentry. And it's not happening for everybody, but he's been able to help us to operate the pop-up village. And these are the kinds of things that we want to see happen more. And so how can we start to help formerly incarcerated individuals overcome the boundaries of the obstacles that are placed in front of them in their reentry into society? And a lot of that comes through designing for policy and program reform. For example, we have the Assembly Bill 109, and this is known as a realignment bill. And the effect of this bill was to divert people convicted of certain classes of less serious felonies from the Department of Corrections to local county jails. However, this realignment doesn't change how things work for serious crimes. So again, you have this kind of recycling back into the incarceration systems. And so we need to start to look at things like Prop 47, which we have felonies reduced to misdemeanors, early release programs. So at DJDS, again, it's not just about design. We have to understand the policies that are keeping these oppressive systems into place in order to really be able to facilitate change. And during this pandemic, it is even more intense. During COVID-19, we have thousands of incarcerated individuals who are being released to keep the spread of COVID-19 down in the prison population. But what are they being released out into? There's no resources, there's no infrastructure to support this influx of people. And so we generated this diagram in our office with input from formerly incarcerated individuals to explore what this process might look like. When you come out, you're supposed to quarantine for 14 days. Well, where is that going to happen? Where is the state hotel? How do we self-isolate? Where do I go? Where's the clinics? Where's the bed for me to sit in? And so we really needed to look at this and start to understand what's happening so that we can then respond to it. One of the ways that we're starting to look at is actually we're looking to make new partnerships with Black churches. And through gentrification and disinvestment, many Black churches have experienced a reduction in their congregations, but they remain land rich, and they have many buildings that are underused. And so one of our projects is the Hope Reentry Campus. And so this is located in East Oakland. On the upper right is the existing church. There in the center is an actual an old charter school building that's been sitting empty for about 5 years, and then another administrative building. And so the idea with this was that we would take this charter school and actually use it to house 40 formerly incarcerated women and have it supported with wraparound services, classrooms, therapeutic spaces for counseling, critical family reunification spaces, outdoor agriculture, and spaces like recreation spaces and a gym. And then there's this idea of also social enterprise. So there was going to be, we wanted to have a cafe where people who are living at the facility could actually be trained and work there at the cafe. So again, you're not just providing just a building, but you're really trying to create a restorative ecosystem that can be sustained by the community once the project is finished. As we started to look at the financing for this project, we realized, particularly here in the Bay Area where construction costs are just astronomical, we needed to look at an alternative way to approach this project. And one of that was actually through developing a modular room. We're currently calling our mobile refuge room unit. And typically in reentry situations, you have men and women who are placed in rooms which would maybe have 3 to 10 people in them, from anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. You get a bed, you get a locker, there's no privacy. You're dealing with people who maybe have ongoing problems with mental health issues, or maybe they're still in drug recovery. But being able to have a place that you can anchor down and have some privacy, and just to be able to settle in as you're trying to re-enter is so very important for emotional health. And so we wanted to look at moving away from the traditional construction of rooms and how we could maybe do something that was modular that might help us save money. And this is where the mobile refuge room emerged. And so we were actually able to do a prototyping workshop with formerly incarcerated individuals from the Restoring Our Communities program located at a local community college here at Laney College. And we were able to ask some critical questions about what would they need in a space like this? How could we really support your emotional health as you're re-entering society? And we actually ended up using two of those students to help us to build and create the actual prototypes. And so they learned valuable job skills that were able to transfer and help them to get jobs once they left the program. So again, creating an ecosystem, not just delivering the one product and then walking away, but how can you really start to generate a sustainable economic program around the projects as well. So this is two of the prototypes that we created. This is the one on the left is the our prototype A that we created, and then we actually on the left side, on the right side, you're seeing our beta prototype, which we actually have had 3 people who have cycled in and out of the room, and one is currently living in there now, and we're getting really good feedback in terms of how this is helping people in the reentry process. So recently we had the opportunity, this is actually back in May, we had, because we're still in the prototyping phase, we worked with Autodesk through their Impact Pro Bono program to help us rethink about how we could improve the design, make it easier to deploy. We moved from having 4 huge 2 foot deep by 4 foot 8 boxes that were being rolled into place into smaller 2 foot modules. So there's a Murphy bed, there's a sliding barn door, and these panels that close to create the walls of the enclosure. And so we're actually building this prototype right now, and we'll be deploying that one in the field in the next few weeks. And then our third bucket that I want to talk about is repurposing and reimagining. So the Center for Equity, the ACDC project is a project we're super proud to be a part of. And it's one of the most cutting edge and exemplary processes for how cities can begin to close down and reimagine what a jail could look like once it's closed down. How do you then turn this back over to the community? So in 2019, Mayor Keisha Bottoms sponsored legislation. She signed into law a bill that would create a task force that would actually look at what this reimagining would look like. And DJDS was asked by the community organizers to come and help them to devise a community engagement process around this building. We're looking at a 471,000 square foot building. This thing is a monster. And it's designed to, and how do you readapt this building that was designed for a single use, which was to keep people enclosed, was to isolate. And how you then begin to open this back up so that it starts to serve the community. And so I'm gonna turn it over to Brandi to talk about what our community engagement process was like with the City of Atlanta.
Well, again, it was the juice, as Deanna says, the secret sauce, y'all. And we ain't talking about Burger King, okay? We talking about designing justice and designing spaces. You can see this beautiful table. My amazing Shiro ancestor, Shirley Chisholm, said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, then bring your pull-up chair, right? Make sure that you bring your pull-up chairs, what Shirley Chisholm said, first African-American woman to run for president. And so we recognize often our community is not asked to sit at the table. Well, first of all, Mayor Keisha Bottoms and Women on the Rise, they are moving those kind of designs out of the way, so to speak, because she created a task force of community leaders to actually imagine what a center of equity could look like. And so as we began to think together, we thought, everybody here has a seat at the table. So as you can see here, we actually created a table with a replica model of that 400, 500, 471,000 square foot building. And we created menu cards because we were getting ready to create a new menu and a new design. Each of the different platelets that you see represent a floor. And this building, y'all think 12 stories when we think about the mezzanines, 8. Right? And so we began working with the community to begin to create a new menu. So each cube and color that you see on the slides represent different programs that could be potentially in this new center of equity. As you go down to the side there, you see the circle bubble game. Those are looking at space, y'all. Often we go to community, and I'm sure some of you may have participated. I don't know how far you are in education, in charrettes. And folks, you say, what do you guys need in the community? And the community says, we need a daycare. And the building is like 20,000 square feet. And you're like, okay, and what else are we gonna put in it? And how is it gonna operate? And so again, we co-created games like space planning that actually kind of replicate. This is 1,000 square foot, y'all, and that floor is 10,000 square feet. How much, what else can go on that floor? Again, decoding design so it's understandable for every person and they're esteemed. They're not talked at, but talked with. And so we had an amazing opportunity to work with several leaders, community organizers, and as we alluded to early, public servants to actually engage with reimagining what the Atlanta City Jail could be if it were a center of equity.
So after our community engagement process, what emerged was really one of the most important goals was that this place needed to be a welcoming one-stop shop. And it was something that if you're re-entering or if you needed services, you weren't having to go to all these disparate places all over the city, but that you could come to one central hub in South downtown Atlanta, and it would have all of what we were calling pathways. So this what you're seeing here is actually a synthesis of the community's priorities, which were around having places to gather in a community hub, having safe housing, food sovereignty, which talks about not just having food available, but actually a food ecosystem where food is actually grown and it's distributed and then it's sold, and we're creating a sustainable economic system around food that people can actually survive off of. Arts and culture, knowledge building, healthy mind and body, which we need to do all of these things. And then also having daily needs retail and access to justice and being able to feel secure and knowing how to manage your finances. These were all things that we wanted to see inside the building. And so from that, we were actually able to develop 4 development options. So 2 of them were dedicated to actually repurposing the existing building. And then we have 2 of them that were actually dedicated to demolishing the existing structure and completely redesigning what would happen on that site. I'm going to talk about one of the repurposing ideas. And with the full repurpose, we would actually, one of the first things that we would have to do is actually to let the light into the building. In that existing photo that you saw, again, we're talking about a building that was meant to isolate, and they're only letting in the minute amount of light necessary for people to survive. But it's not something that you could actually use in a commercial building model, or to be able to facilitate housing, or to just service people. So one of the things that we would first do would be to let the light in by removing the precast concrete panels that were covering the building. And so you can see there's a pattern of where we've removed those panels. And there's kind of a staggering of openings where we have more of our community spaces. In the center, you see there's where there's wood cladding, where those would be open spaces out for people to be able to gather, and also be able to have them as grow spaces on the south side of the building where those kind of open spaces are replicated. We wanted to bring a new bold color to the building as well, to be unapologetic about this notion of change that we're providing here in the building. And then also incorporating art into the building allows us to bring a level of customization that's not always available in that you're going to find in standard products. And so we had this idea of creating these butterflies using recycled materials, and each of the butterflies could commemorate people who were impacted by the jail. And so those are seen sweeping across the building, again, in this kind of creating this motion of change that we're creating in reimagining what could happen for this new center of equity in this full repurpose scheme. On the inside of the building, again, so where we had those large window openings, you're seeing these community spaces. These were one of the priority spaces that people had in mind, and something that would be that would accommodate intergenerational interaction. So you could come here and you could find exercise classes. There's meeting rooms. There's a play area, and there's plants and just an opening up of the building. Again, so that people can feel welcome. One of the things that we had to do and one of the ideas that we were exploring in order to bring light into the building was actually to cut back the floor plates. So in this open space, you're actually seeing where the floor will be cut back, and actually brings light deeper into the building because we have deep floor plates. And so it allows light to be able to bring natural light to be able to come and illuminate these spaces. As we were developing the program elements and pathways, the unusual thing about this process is that we didn't have the normal client who comes in and says, okay, I need 1,000 square feet for meeting rooms, or I need 3,000 square feet for this. And we were actually trying to allocate all of those pathways throughout all of the square footage that we had. We needed to come up with a way to be able to allocate the programming throughout the building. So we came up with the idea of modules, which you're seeing an example of on the left-hand side. So this is like a community space. And so we looked at what are the typical components that you would find in a community space. So there would be a gym, there would need to be locker rooms, there would need to be state exercise rooms. So each of those was allocated a certain amount of standard square footage, and then it was laid out onto the floor plate, onto the main floor and then a mezzanine floor. And so we did these for each of the pathways, and it just allowed people to be able to understand how they could start to see their program in the building. And again, as I mentioned before, sustainability is always a huge part of how it's an integral part of our design process. And so we partnered with ERA, which is one of the larger architecture firms, and they are experts in sustainability. They were able to help us to come up with a sustainability strategy for the building. And we were able to incorporate a whole program that could be incorporated into the design of the building. So what you're seeing here is on the ground floor of the repurposed scheme is the super lobby. And the super lobby mirrors the community's desire to have a welcoming, accessible, and inclusive experience when entering the building. And what we did was to embed biophilic design elements. And so you're seeing this kind of honeycomb hexagon shape that you experience in nature. It's replicated on the outside of the building with the canopies that are shaped in the same, and have a similar shape, and then you're seeing it also on the ceiling, brought in nature, warm finishes with a wood floor. And we actually are cutting a portion of the floor that goes down into the basement, and we have a huge canopy that then opens up the building from the basement all the way up through the second floor. Again, kind of signifying this breaking of the old ways and to bringing a new way of change into the design. And so all of the programmatic elements, all those 9 pathways are immediately visible on the ground floor. There's casual, formal spaces for people to sit alone or gather in groups. You can have this internet access where people can make a phone call, a cafe. So all the things that people wanted to see are here in this very active super lobby. So in that second idea of reimagining, it was to actually tear down the entire building and to rebuild. And so one of those ideas was actually to build a new campus. And so what you're seeing here are 3 brand new buildings. So on the right is actually where the jail the actual jail used to be. And so that's actually replaced by two twin towers that are centered over a community, that are banked in the middle with a community space that sits over daily needs retail. There's housing on the upper levels, and anchored on the left side of the building is a new building that is going to house some community spaces and justice access spaces. And all of these are centered around a new plaza. And so this is just a completely new vision for what a reimagined jail could look like, and turning it into a center for equity that is then servicing the community. And one of the second ideas in terms of actually demolishing the building was actually this distributed equity model. And this was actually one of the preferred options, because again, you're erasing any idea of the existing jail, and you're replacing it with a commemorative park. And then you can actually have smaller centers for equity that are distributed throughout Atlanta. One of the things that we have to think about is that it's always about access, and not everyone is able to access something it's centrally located, yes, but still we're thinking about people who live outside of the city of Atlanta, maybe an hour away. We want to be able to make those things accessible to everyone. So being able to have people say, oh, you know what, this is what we need in our community. And so we can develop a smaller network of centers throughout the city of Atlanta. You're seeing here in this map some of the ideas of where those might be located. So downtown Atlanta is kind of in the bottom center, but then you might want to have something that's located nearby in West End, or further out in Dunwoody and North Cross. So again, it distributes the equity and makes it more accessible to a wider range of people. And so with all that, we are dedicated and committed to building a diverse team. We are growing even during this pandemic. We are adding new people to our team, and it's critical to have expertise in so many different levels in order to really be able to complete this work successfully. Again, not just in architectural design, we have that expertise, but we also have a development director, real estate development director, someone who's an expert in finances. We have Brandi, who's our community engagement director. I don't know too many architecture firms that actually have someone whose main job is to engage with the community, and it's such a critical part of what we do, and it makes it all come together. And so I'm going to end, we're going to end with this slide, and this is what justice looks like in public. And again, we hope that we're not trying to be beholders of this process and the work that we're doing. We want to share what we're doing. We want it to be replicated across the country. This is what it's going to need to happen. We can't be the only people that are doing this work. And so it's important for us to be able to have these talks, to be able to dialogue about what this really looks like. It's all new. We're trying to figure it out, but it's been a wonderful challenge trying to do so. And we thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Shelley. That was intense. That was beautiful. I think we'll be able to share the slides. I can see folks' energy who have their screen on, like, whoop. Take a minute and drop your jaw a little bit. Kind of open your mouth. Sometimes trauma gets stuck in there, right? And it just, because you be hearing stuff, you feel it. We want you to don't check out, check in. You are the future, your students. We need your imagination. We need your intention and your availability to shift this. Deanna Van Buren has pushed it, and it got to keep going. And what we know and live by is we go fast alone, but we only gonna go far together. And so that's what's needed. We're gonna stop talking. I'm sure maybe there's some questions. If we're doing that part, y'all let me know.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Let me stop sharing my screen here.
Are there questions from students or the rest of the audience? We have a very large audience, which is fantastic to see.
Anna Van Buren is here too. I see her.
I see our team member. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah.
I would like to, maybe it's more of a comment, I guess you could say. I don't remember exactly if it was Brandi or Shelley who said it, but you guys were talking about the idea of placekeeping instead of calling it placemaking. And I really like the use of that term because oftentimes, like where I'm from, it's when they're going into certain communities, it's usually like, oh, we're gonna make this new place for you, and it's usually devoid of culture, and it usually also sort of looks at the people who are impoverished culture like it's not good enough to be on display in a sense. So especially where I'm from, so like I really like some of the images that you guys had where you kind of visually had representations of the community's culture on there, on the buildings, like sort of like a graffiti like or certain bold colors, which sometimes is not as embraced. So that was just something I really like. Something I took away that I think I want to keep in mind to use maybe the word placekeeping, because I feel like that's how I feel about it too, instead of placemaking. But yeah, that's just a comment.
I guess I'll share a comment as well. I really like the approach that you all took in first identifying kind of like inequitable circumstances that are, often found in Black communities, communities of color, et cetera. And then from there, really just elaborating on how this spatial kind of awareness within those kind of inequitable circumstances can be redirected in a way to then provide equity. And one thing that you all said, I can't remember which project you showed a good number, which I definitely appreciated as well. But you mentioned like redistributing agency and power within one of the projects. And I'm aware that, oftentimes in Black communities, we show a level of power that's often we think of it as, this kind of, physical, like I'm powerful in that sense, or I have money, but I don't, but it's all, and it honestly, from my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, it's a misplaced power. It's a misunderstood understanding of power. But seeing it through this kind of spatial lens actually begins to allow me to kind of re-engage how I see power. But I want to know the kind of process that you guys took in thinking that through and then representing that.
So I think you're talking about our Restore Oakland project.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so in thinking about how do you restore communities? There, as I mentioned, there's always that we want all the things, right? And there's always that disconnect between how is it actually going to happen, and there has to be that financial piece. And so with the expertise that we have in-house through our real estate division, real estate and finance division, we're able to think along those lines and to be able to think, to actually reimagine how we can communicate that level of knowledge, because most people don't like to think about the numbers. It's not really the most fun part. And so we really have to be innovative in how we communicate that. One of the things that we used in Atlanta was our space planning and finance game. So it allowed people to be able to understand the scale. So we're using these bubbles that represent different sizes of different programming elements and placing it on a scale plan. And then also building on that to say, okay, if you have this much square footage, then it costs this much to build it. And building that in a fun way, we actually used poker chips to say, okay, these are representing different funding sources. And so people would roll the dice, and if they had a certain number on the dice, they got a certain amount of chips to be able to fund their program. So it's a way to be able to link, again, a program element, how large it is, and then what it takes to fund it, and also understand that there are different sources out there. So it's just a matter of how can you start to communicate complicated ideas in ways that are fun, in ways that are engaging, and that's what our community engagement process is really about. It's about empowering people and giving them the tools to understand what's happening when development, when they're trying to engage in development, or when development is happening in their neighborhoods. I hope that answered your question.
No, it does very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, Kyle Marr said he had a question. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I first just want to say why I'm on the DEI committee as well. And it was just really cool working on this project this year. And it was really exciting to have you guys. And thank you for a great presentation. But I just want to ask, so I'm a second-year student. In our studio right now, we're looking at social injustice, specifically with food deserts in downtown Syracuse. And we had a larger discussion kind of about sort of in a binary way where you have this community engagement where you're involving the people that you're building for and talking to them about what they want in a space. And then kind of the other side being adding this flexibility and this adaptability to it where you can kind of create the space and the people that are using it, create it to be what they want it to be. And you guys both gave very great examples of kind of both ends of it and the modularity aspect, but I just wanted to kind of hear your take on how you think of those things together, if it's sort of like a hybrid model in your minds, or if one sort of comes after the other.
I can speak to that. They're all together. That one of the most important things that we do is engage the community in the very beginning of the process and the idea. Often in institutions, academia, we do a lot of prescription. This is what you need, right? And we have wonderful words like food desert is even a wonderful word that we created. Some would say that the new word is food sovereignty. We need to move out of, food desert is older. And so what we know and we value is the community through every stage of the process and making sure that we are doing constant feedback loops. So it's so intentional to kind of listen again. And you all wrote that word down, listen, right? Who found the word in the word listen yet? You can put it in the chat. It's so important because it's the one most important thing you have to do to listen is you have to be silent. Our education, this society, as I showed you the timeline, unfortunately, for African Americans has not allowed us to be heard intentionally. And so the one thing that I will just encourage as we think about engaging is to really be silent. That's the word in that word listen. If you didn't find it, that's the key word to listening, is to be silent. And understand that the community they are the experts, and we're designing co-designers with them. I'm hoping that kind of answered, but it's a continuum. So we will go through the first process where we get into pre-development, and we have that beautiful concept development process that Shelley shared with you. In that process, we come out with a beautiful shiny packet, which includes the performa, like how much does it cost for the building to happen? Here are some renderings and some massing and some ideas. And then from there, we got to go get pre-development dollars, y'all, right, to build the thing. We're still talking to community, even through this process. Not just fall off the planet, that was a great idea, because that's also a part of the trauma that is unfortunately continuously happening in African American communities, where we're extracting ideas and information and knowledge without a feedback loop or even thinking this may or may not happen.
Thank you.
I think that's a great point. But I have a follow-up to what Kyle or something you just mentioned. How do you suggest we do that in a virtual format now? Like, for example, or even in an educational format, because sometimes we are designing in school, and typically it's done based on whatever online research you can find, essentially. And then there's like an assessment that's done based on what you think people need. And it kind of sort of stays in maybe a conceptual, theoretical realm. So how could we intersect that with like educational learning and or like a virtual format where you can engage with the community and get that sort of feedback loop when we're designing for them.
Give thanks. So we've been so busy doing what you all are doing. In the beginning of our call, remember we couldn't find the caption, y'all. We all are trying to learn how to zoom, right? And so the mural board is something that we're using to engage. The mural board is what we're, as a design, we're using that tool so that we can bring our images and our vision cards and our vision boards and things that we traditionally do in person to bring it virtually. The other thing I want to say is, hey, Mr. Telephone Man. Oh, pick up the telephone and call somebody. Do you hear me? Because part of what's going on in community, we know that folks of color have been in a pandemic before the pandemic. The digital divide is real, and it's going to require you to get on the telephone. Do you hear me? Get on social Instagram and gram them. Hey, I see y'all doing this program in community, and I'm trying to design something around it. Oh, the other thing you can do is just go volunteer. Because engaging with community, again, there's this exchange that when we're even deciding to work with a group, we go do what's called an immersive site visit. We go and visit and work with the group, see what you're doing. That it can even look like, Deanna can attest, to serving food. We're planting gardens with community. It's called connection, not extraction. I understand, and I want us to all think about this individually, the work we all individually have to do to really design from a different lens, where we are in relation and not in transaction. Old school, pick up the phone, Crystal.
Yeah,
that's old school now.
Yeah. That there still has to be a level of personal interaction. We still are meeting people in person, we're social distancing. So it's really about expanding what we're already doing. We're not completely reliant on all digital tools. So we're basically just expanding how we're working with people, but we're always keeping in mind that particularly in low-income communities, not everybody is going to have access to digital. So you've still got to use those analog communication tools. It's super important to not just to think that, oh, everything's online now. It's not true.
Yeah, especially I think just picking up on that, I think that goes because a lot of these communities, maybe there is there's a lack of resources for a lot of people, especially in our own backyard. I think as you guys do know maybe a little bit about Syracuse, we are in one of the most segregated cities in this country. And I'm wondering, I've tried to engage in different ways in the community. It's never easy. You get a range of different types to work with, but you have to keep kind of trying. So just to kind of piggyback off what Crystal's talking about, how to get engaged. I think, I don't know if you guys have any just general comments for them. It's always tough to kind of navigate a place that you're not that familiar with. They're all kind of in their zone at school, but I think if you guys have any kind of general thoughts about how you think the students could start to engage in their community in some way and reach out. How do they even begin when, maybe they don't know a lot of people in the area? They obviously know us. We're here. We've been here for quite a few years. We're one good resource, the professors. But I just wonder if there's other ways that they could start to initiate some like small scale bottom up initiatives to just kind of keep the discourse moving for them at a local level.
Sure. One thing that I would really strongly suggest is before going out on a well-meaning mission to connect with community is to really do some self-examination. We mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation about really examining what it is that you value. You need to understand that before you start to engage in traumatized communities, because you could end up doing more harm. There are a number of resources and books that you can look at in terms of understanding if you're focusing on mass incarceration or understanding racism and the history of it. Those things are really, and understanding your place in structural racism and understanding what privileges you might have within that. That's very, very important. And that's something that we actually require with people who are coming to work with us or even volunteer, because we cannot afford to have any more trauma in the community. So I would start there. And then as Brandi mentioned, then you can start to reach out, talking with individuals, pick up the phone and just call. And keep calling until you reach somebody and say, hey, you know, I want to be able to engage and talk with you about this thing. I'm a student, and maybe start a volunteer process. But it start with the self-work first, and then you just have to be not shy about reaching out and just talking to people. That's where it's going to come. It's going to really come. The best work is going to come through honest, open dialogue. That would be the best suggestion that I have. Now, Brandi, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
I was just going to say that. And remember, when you go out, stewardship is so important for people and the planet. How are you being a steward? How are we not missionary, just, oh, those poor people? We got to go help them, because we're in School of Design. I want to piggyback on what Shelley said. Really, it's so important to pick up all those wonderful books with bell hooks. And I mean, the plethora of books that are going on in the planet right now to support all of us to do our work are important. But I find that being a servant, a steward to beloved community is one of the most best ways to engage. How can you step in? And Shelley said something very important, understanding your privilege, so that you are not re-traumatizing, but you're saying, you know what, I'm just a full-time student. I'm not navigating a free food line. Can I come and help you all distribute food? Do you all need help recycling at the end of your day? Like engaging, y'all, you know, like building with each other out of transaction. Even if you're just at school for a moment, relationships are everything. So I just want to say that, and we must build them where they're not just transaction relationships, but actual real relationships back and forth. So starting with self-examination, moving into volunteering with community, and that word keeps coming up, listening. So sometimes that just being quiet, even if you want to go, I have this idea. I want to show y'all, we're going to build this thing. It's going to be great. Be quiet. Listen, just work. Carry the water, stack the books.
Thanks, guys. So we're a little bit over time, so I'm just going to take two last questions that came to me. So Kay, I see Kay said she has a question. You can go ahead. Hey, Kay girl, is your mic working?
Yeah, so sorry. My question was basically, you guys do a ton of research both before design and after, like, you build the thing. And I was wondering what things that you've discovered do not work through this process. And that can be either spatial or like learning techniques or community techniques.
Well, one thing we know for sure that does not work is showing up thinking that we have all the answers. Hence all of the research that's necessary. So I think it's really about letting go of any preconceived notions that we have before entering into a project. Another thing that we've discovered in terms of some of our community engagement processes is that, you know, at one point we were coming in and trying to wrangle people in to come attend a community engagement workshop. But you have to realize that people are busy. We all are busy, but particularly for somebody who might be working 2 jobs, or they're working on the weekends, and they've got kids that they're trying to manage. And so asking somebody to show up at a 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. engagement session is just, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So really, when you're engaging with community, you want to find out what's already happening in the community that you can tap into. And so that was really one of the ways that we were able to bolster up how we could engage, understanding about engaging with community. So instead of trying to set up separate events that people would have to really navigate through a lot to get to, was to be able to say, oh, hey, there's already this men's group that's meeting on Thursday. Let's show up there. And so those are the things that we started to see that were working. Brandi, were there anything else that you?
Well, the one thing we know that doesn't work is monocropping, right? And I'm using using now a permaculture tool and it's monocropping. I think it's just one we know that doesn't work in our process is working with just one ecosystem folks. So when we think about even spatially or even programmatically, and we're doing our research, that we're not just looking at one idea. I mean, we spend time visiting buildings and courting and figuring it out. And so our process is inclusive. So it doesn't, what we know doesn't work is working just with one. We always have to open up our ecosystem. And when we say community engagement, we mean even the folks who don't agree with us. Because part of what our intention is to show you why you should agree with us. The reason why everybody should make sure there's no more cases. We're still new though, okay? So there's more that we're gonna learn. What's really awesome is that we're always willing to learn. Like our process changes. Deanna and I be on the road. We say, this just in, new idea, let's roll with it. We're nimble and flexible. So it's allowing for us to work. And I think that's really important to remember. In design, traditionally, sometimes things are so very fixed. And in this style of design, you must be willing to be flexible and shift right there in that moment.
Okay, so I have one student. Thank you guys for that answer, by the way. Sorry about that. So I have one student who is really shy of what would like me to ask a question, and then another who wants to get a question in. He begged me, so I will do that. So Isaac, can you ask your question? And then I will relate the other student's question.
Yes, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question was, what are your thoughts, and I guess, do you think architects' historic lack of political or urban policy engagement should change to increase systemic top-down positive change on restorative justice efforts, or can similar systemic positive momentum and opportunities emerge strictly from grassroots efforts? And I'm guessing the answer is probably a bit of both, but yeah, I'm just curious your guys' thoughts.
You're right. It's
Yeah,
both.
absolutely. Go ahead. Absolutely, it is both. I mean, in order to do this work, you cannot engage without engaging in policy change and understanding what are some of the structural things that are keeping these systems of oppression in place. Otherwise, you have no way of dismantling them. You're putting a Band-Aid on the problem. We're talking about addressing the root cause. Our work is around addressing the root cause of the problem. And so if you're interested in doing that, then you have to explore these other aspects. Again, it's not just about delivering a shiny new building. We've got to do the research. We have to make contact with people who are involved in policies, which is why we engage with organizers who are steeped in that. One of our clients was with Elevator Center. They are steeped in changing policy around mass incarceration. So I don't think that you can really make change without doing that. It's kind of again, you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem and not really addressing the root cause of it.
That's the charge for us. Let me say that we even have a director of advocacy in our team, right? Like, it's so very important for technical folks in our field of design to not just hide behind the design board with the pencil, but actually engage and think about, we got to go into the root. So that means our bottom up, top up, all together, we have to make the shift and the change so we can no longer live in our silos, which again, supported building racism. The topic of our presentation was unbuilding it. So we really want to show folks your public dollars have supported building of racism, of the buildings, right? All of us folks who are paying, and so we all are a part of that ecosystem, and we have to engage in a way that we're willing to unbuild it with the public dollars. So it's a charge for you all as you finish up school, that you can't just leave this at school. I'm sending a charge with you right now. You got to engage with policy too, if you want to design for restoration.
I have to say, I'm also really impressed with the fact that you guys have all these different roles that usually aren't seen in designing companies. I'm really impressed with that. I think it's something probably more people or more firms should take on in general, not just from a nonprofit standpoint, but just in general, I feel like it would drive the architectural designs to be more sensitive in a sense. And then my last shy student question, he basically is saying, Brandi talks about not re-traumatizing people. So I guess he's concerned as a white person who would like to do this work and would like to help, you know, how, like, he's concerned about his place in something like that. How can he help with something like that? Because sometimes I guess he feels like as a white person, just being white, sometimes he might have a certain intention, but maybe people don't feel like he's coming from that place, if you get what I'm saying. So
sometimes you can have good intention and a jacked up impact. Part of what I'll say is know your place on a team and work within the team. And again, it goes back to the listen. Often, you know, sometimes folks with just white presenting skin, and they may not be white, can trigger folks in the community. And this is where you need to get together with your allies and your classmates and figure out, what's my place here? Maybe I don't need to be in the front of the space, that I got to fall back. That honestly, you all, as we think about unbuilding racism and think about what's happening on our planet right now in this pandemic, we need radical allies to listen, available. And so you're right, I'm so grateful, a little shy to mention, but as you can see the picture of our team, we're an ecosystem that's really biodiverse. Our team has an ecosystem that's biodiverse. And so what I want to say is, if you can be re-traumatizing, work with your team, be willing to do that personal work, because again, we don't have time in this skinny minute trying to go over all of it, but there's several lectures, several in it to be able to support us. I hope I'm not frozen. There's several books and several things on the planet right now to support all of us to do our decolonized work. So I would say start with self and get radical allies and understand when to fall back. That has to happen right now on the planet for us to go further.
Crystal, I think you're
Crystal,
muted.
you're on mute. Okay, good. I thought it was.
I didn't realize I was mute. I have to say thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you so much for the presentation, the amount of time you guys took, the amount of projects you guys showed, the different varieties. Just the idea of it not just being theoretically designed, but also going into policy, how you can influence policy with design, and make these things long lasting. I think it was really critical to a lot of the work that we're doing. A number of us have projects that are currently in Syracuse this semester. So the concepts overall are really relevant to how we'll move forward. And I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to come share with us. And I also appreciate Diana taking the time to pop into the Zoom meeting as well, even though she didn't present. That's highly appreciated.
Thank you, everybody. We're so honored to be able to present to you guys today, and thank you for your great questions.
Okay, so with that,
Yes.
guys, I guess
And
we
keep
will
questioning and be willing
That's
to
right.
be radical.
Keep questioning.
If you could, before you guys leave, because I know you mentioned it, put your info. I think you said your email, or I don't remember if it was the email or just the PowerPoint presentation that you said you would share. But I'm sure if students would like to reach out, if it's possible to contact you, that would be appreciated for them to be able to access. And thank you for everybody who joined. I'm really glad to see the 3 pages of Zoom.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much to everyone.
Yeah. All right, guys. So I guess that's it. I don't know if Amber or Julie want to say anything before we go. That's it. All right, they're fine. So bye, guys.
We really appreciate it.
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Crystal, you did an awesome job.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye, Luna.